Just ahead on American Black Journal, American slavery began 400 years ago. We're going to take an up-close look at the New York Times groundbreaking series on the legacy of slavery called the 1619 Project. Plus, a local performer and activist talks about using entertainment to promote social justice. American Black Journal starts now.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Support also provided by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, a partner with communities where children come first. The Cynthia and Etzel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV.
The DTE Foundation proudly supports 50 years of American Black Journal in covering African American history, culture, and politics. The DTE Foundation and American Black Journal, partners in presenting African American perspectives about our communities and in our world.
Also brought to you by Ally, Nissan Foundation, and viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. This year marks the 400th anniversary of the start of American slavery. It was on August 20th, 1619, when the first ship carrying enslaved Africans arrived in the British colony of Virginia. The New York Times Magazine commemorated this important date in history with a major initiative called the 1619 Project. It's a collection of essays, short stories, and poems on how slavery defined life in the United States then and now. Joining me is the New York Times journalist who came up with the idea for the project, Nicole Hannah-Jones, along with Kenyatta Berry, a genealogist and contributor to the 1619 Project. Welcome, both of you, to American Black Journal.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Nicole, I'll start with you since this was your idea. And first, let me say, the work is extraordinary. I still am going back, I feel like, over and over again to the things in there and finding new ideas each time. Tell our viewers how you came up with this and why it's important.
So I've been thinking about the year 1619 since I first came across that date in high school. And I was reading a book called Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett. And I just remember being shocked that people of African descent had been here that long and that slavery began that long ago, because we were never taught that. And that seemed like a very intentional thing, that we were not taught that we got here even before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock. So as the anniversary was approaching, I just kept thinking that this is probably one of the most momentous anniversaries in the history of our country, and most Americans are going to have no idea that this date even exists or that this is something we should acknowledge. And I decided to pitch a project at the Times where we would kind of force that acknowledgement, but also that we would draw the very direct connections between the decision to engage in slavery and modern America, and really make the argument that nothing about our modern society, almost nothing, has been left untouched by that decision.
Yeah, I mean, and that really is, I think, one of the sort of cardinal achievements of this project, is that it shows in so many different ways how slavery continues to influence the way we live now. And that's not an uncontroversial idea. There are a lot of people who want to say, look, that was 400 years ago. We got rid of slavery more than 150 years ago. It doesn't matter. But the work in this project really ties it all together and says, these things we deal with now are about that.
Absolutely, that was very intentional. When I was thinking about this project, I was thinking exactly about that argument that I get on Twitter at least once a week, which is, get over the past. That was a long time ago. And so the magazine is not a history. The magazine is saying you can look at all of these aspects of American life, that some of them which you may think are related to slavery, but many of them that you would have no idea related to slavery. And we can trace it back and show that it is not only linked to slavery, but the ongoing legacy of slavery right now. And that was very important to me, because what I argue is, if you think 1776 is important, even though that was 250 years ago, if you think that the Constitution is important, even though that was drafted in the 1780s, then you can't say that 1619 doesn't matter. You can't say that the 100 years of racial apartheid that followed the end of slavery doesn't matter. We don't get to pick and choose which parts of our history affect us today and which ones don't, and clearly slavery does.
Yeah. And of course, genealogy is a big part of this narrative of this story.
Yeah, and so what we did with 4 students from Howard University, the law students, was really try to trace their history, their family history, to let them know that you can find your enslaved ancestors, really inspire them. And so one of the things, African American genealogy, we typically think we can't find our ancestors because they were enslaved, and that's not true. It's difficult, for sure, but I think it was really important to have that be a piece and part of this project, and I was excited when Nicole asked me to join it.
Yeah, I'm someone who in the last 5 years has taken more interest in where my family came from, where our name came from in Mississippi, and it is difficult, but as you point out, there are ways to do it, and there are some clues, I guess, that all of us would find sort of in our immediate family.
Yeah, it's important for you to interview your family members, right? One of the things we had the students do is they did an essay and they submitted that to Nicole and to the Times, but we had them fill out an ancestral chart and go back and talk to their family members to fill in those gaps. So it's important to interview your family members. You can get beyond the 1870 brick wall, which 1870 is the first census that enumerated those 4 million, right, that were formerly enslaved.
Right.
You can get through that using the Freedmen's Bureau records and other record sets, voter registrations, different things like that, state census records as well. But it's a long process, and it can be overwhelming for some people, but it's very inspiring. And I think what I got personally from it was just having the students be inspired, right, once they learned about their family members. And that brings me joy, because it gives me purpose in what I do.
Yeah, one of the things that I have found is that the plantation records for my family are actually kept at Louisiana State University because that's where I guess the plantation, I guess that's where they've kept them forever. But I didn't know that until I went south and started asking questions and found it.
Yeah, so a lot of archives actually do have those records. So I work a lot with the University of Mississippi. They have records. Like you said, Louisiana State University has records. So you will find that people donate the account books. Right. Maybe someone went to that university, or someone in the family member down the road did that. So you can find that information, but you have to physically go there, like you said. Not everything is online.
Yeah. Nicole, I tell a story a lot about how recently African Americans have had kind of the liberty that we enjoy now, and it's about my dad, who was born in Mississippi in 1933, grows up and joins the Air Force and goes off to fight in the Korean War, and comes home to Mississippi and can't vote. Comes home to Mississippi and can't sit at lunch counters like other people, can't have jobs that other people can have. And again, this is my father. This is one generation removed from me. I think those kinds of stories are lost on a lot of the discussion about slavery and its impact on people today.
Absolutely. In the opening essay that I write for the project, I say, I'm 43 years old and I'm part of the first generation of Black Americans in the history of the country and the British colonies that made the United States, who were born with full legal rights. So as much as we want to say that was a long time ago, when you consider that the first people of African descent came to Virginia in 1619, and it wasn't until 1968 that Black Americans got full legal citizenship rights, we should not be surprised that we still are grappling with the legacy of this. The legacy is alive. The legacy are our parents' generation and our grandparents' generation, who couldn't partake of things that white immigrants who had come to the country a year earlier could do. that is really part of our desire not to remember this past, to pretend that it was a long time ago, so that we don't actually have to remedy the wrongs that have been done, but also we don't have to acknowledge the hypocrisy at our founding.
Yeah. You've had an enormous amount of response to this series, I know, but some of it's been pretty negative. There's some real pushback from some high-ranking officials.
Pushback.
Yeah, well, it's kind of it's what they think is real pushback, right? But I wonder what your response is to the claim that somehow this is irrelevant, somehow this is fraudulent to interpret history this way.
That pushback from the far right is the least surprising thing about this project. What's been surprising has been the overwhelming embrace of the project. We have sold out multiple print runs.
I saw pictures of the lines
exactly.
in New York.
People are in my DMs every day asking how can they get a copy of it. That embrace, kids are learning the curriculum, 1619 project curriculum in schools right now, and school just started. But there was certainly pushback, and I knew that. This was a radical reframing of the origin stories, the mythology we've been taught about America, the mythology of the founders, but also of putting those who have been treated as the bottom and placing them central to the American story, and arguing that I mean, I would be foolish not to think when I argue that black people are the real founding fathers that would not be controversial.
Sure.
Or when I'm arguing, that our founding fathers actually didn't believe in the ideals they wrote because they enslaved 1/5 of the population, but black people did and fought to make this a democracy. But what people are not able to challenge are the facts. So they don't have to like the framing. I'm making, this whole project is making an argument, and people can disagree with the argument, but they can't dispute the facts. And again, they want to remember parts of our history that they think glorify us. But if you're going to remember Thomas Jefferson, you have to remember that he enslaved his own children, and you can't pretend like that doesn't matter.
It's a real lesson in the idea that the teller matters, right? Who's telling the story of history really matters in terms of what you're hearing and how it's interpreted.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we spent a lot of time making sure that most of the contributors to this project are Black American. The writers, the photographers, the poets, the people who created the original artwork, because it was not just about telling the story, but it was about who can tell this story in the New York Times, and that it was so important, not that every person, there were people who were not black in the project, but that most of that story was coming from us. But also very, very rigorously researched. That was also very important.
Okay, well, congratulations on the work. It's extraordinary, as I said, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right, coming up, JayZ's partnership with the NFL. But first, here's a 1987 Detroit Black Journal conversation about the psychological impact of slavery on African Americans.
There's a self-denial, a self-rejection that has gone on through generations. Can we cite some examples, perhaps, Dr. Newby, of what occurred in slavery that has continued to affect us today?
Well, slavery really was a degraded position. I mean, it was a low-status position, and people were not given the regard that was really a part of their humanity. And this denial continued even after slavery. So, in fact, what happens is that blacks, I mean, we live in a society in which, as one author phrased it, the rightness of whiteness. So which means that by definition, being black is associated with being slave. It's also associated with that degraded status. And so consequently, it's a badge that has been with us for all these years, really.
So you're taught that everything black is bad, primitive, childlike, unappealing, such as African art. Many times, we were told that was childlike, or, oh, that's ugly. Certainly something that many authors feel was worked at very strongly to keep you on the bottom rung.
Oh, this is true. I think that what slavery did on a day by day, a month by month, a year by year, in fact, a generation by generation, slavery taught black people they were powerless. Okay, they were powerless in a society that was totally dominated by white people. Obviously, I think the consequences of that, if one grows up in an environment where one feels that they are powerless, how are they ever going to compete? How are they ever going to function effectively in a society that is based on competition?
Rapper JayZ raised some eyebrows by partnering with the NFL to help the league expand its social justice initiatives. This comes after he criticized the NFL over the treatment of Colin Kaepernick. So what does JayZ hope to achieve? Is the NFL using him to win back entertainers who boycotted the league? My next guest is a community activist and award-winning music artist who has some interesting thoughts on the JayZ NFL Partnership. He coined the concept entertainment justice to describe how music and the arts can be used to promote social justice and preserve cultural history. I'd like to welcome Bryce Anderson, also known as Bryce Detroit, to American Black Journal. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Stephen.
Yeah. So let's start with JayZ and the NFL. I've got a lot of thoughts about that too. I think a lot of people have and have expressed it on social media and other places. He's gotten a lot of criticism for this move. What's your take on what he's doing here?
We'll start here. There are a number of professional entertainers, cultural advocates and activists who have been in the space of social justice, environmental justice, climate justice for decades.
Forever, right. Yeah.
Now, being on the front lines of this work and so many of the issues, one of our primary approaches is you start with the people who are most impacted by the issues that you're even uplifting. Mm-hmm. So from the approach side, one can look at and question what is the goal in first going to a corporation versus going to the people who are most impacted by the issues you're looking to even raise.
Sure.
And really finding out what are the things that most affect them, what are the perspectives and the analysis that's already been done, mm-hmm. and what way can you use your platform to support what's already happening.
Yeah, and that's been what the criticism has been about, that this looks as though, he's making a deal that doesn't include the people who are most impacted. Now he says this will make a difference in the way that African Americans are treated by the league. It'll make a difference in opportunity. Do you believe that?
See, for me, there's this thing where our brothers and sisters of African ancestry who are in the NFL, there are issues that directly affect them. To me, those are issues around labor more than anything.
Right.
Yet, when we look at what brought Colin Kaepernick into the national spotlight, it was him gesturally protesting issues that are affecting folks not in the NFL.
Other people, that's right.
Other people.
Yeah.
So in that way, then one can question, what do you think you can accomplish?
If you're JayZ.
If you're JayZ, what can you accomplish by going to a corporation and doing something which could amount simply to corporate responsibility,
right?
Versus actually going to the populations that are impacted by the issue that initially brought all this.
Right?
Period. It's police violence. It's
right.
Police brutality that even started this entire conversation. So in what way does creating a corporate partnership support bringing more light that will eventually affect policy around police violence?
Yeah. So as an entertainer yourself, answer that question. What would you do if you were JayZ or any other entertainer? What would be a more constructive way that would affect the police violence issue to get involved?
So one thing for me is, as an entertainer, is first acknowledging that our magic, so to speak, our skill sets lie in the ability to influence identity and behavior. Mm-hmm. So from there, acknowledging that our greatest impact is with our audiences. So in what way can we inspire and influence the way our audiences are maybe thinking about the issues? What way are our audiences actually holding and participating in the resolution or the activism around these issues? But these are real questions that first you have to start with asking yourself. So it's less about what would you do immediately that can create some major impact, and it's more so what is necessary internally for an entertainer to do, acknowledging their platform, acknowledging their reach, acknowledging their audience. What can I do to really provoke a conversation that can impact,
that can move the conversation in this space?
Yeah.
I've seen JayZ talk about police violence. I've seen JayZ talk about inequality in other forums. Is there anything wrong then with trying to get at it from both ends, right? Does the things that he's doing with the NFL, does that negate the kind of things that he said in his music, on other platforms about the African American condition?
Negate, no. But if we reference the way that JayZ presents to move as an entrepreneur, he is very skilled at putting together teams of experts to help him advance and move forward capitalist endeavors.
He's very skilled at that.
He's very skilled at that.
Maybe more skilled than anyone else, really.
At the same time, though, we can acknowledge that there are subject matter experts who exist at the front lines of these issues and live in the neighborhoods and in the communities. These folks have been innovating the analysis and bringing these really synthesized frameworks forward that are allowing much more nuance and actually are moving the needle on policy. So what is the way that you can take your entrepreneurial framework, which is to put together an expert team to help me achieve some things? How can you reference that? And then on this side, ask yourself, what team of experts need I be consulting with to actually move this agenda forward, acknowledging that you don't have all the answers, the same way you acknowledge you don't have all the ideas and answers on a capitalist endeavor.
Right. You know, the separation of the issues here is, I think, one of the problems, right? Which problem does he want to focus on in this arena? And I suppose if he does get, you know, better treatment and better contracts for black players, that's progress of its own. It still does leave, you know, aside this question of, can you leverage your fame to move this other issue?
For me, it would be a question, is that really progress if this entire conversation started with wanting to address police brutality?
Right. That's what Colin Kaepernick was talking about. He was not trying to get a better contract.
At all.
Right.
So for me, it's constructive for us as those on the outside of this to really hold it in a new way, holding the fact that this conversation is about police brutality and what is the way to bring more relevant attention to help move the needle on this issue and not lose sight of that. Like, let's not lose focus. That's really the point here. One person or even two people, because Colin Kaepernick supposedly has a very lucrative settlement with the NFL and a deal with Nike. Right. So two people being able to leverage this opportunity for their own economic, financial empowerment does not move the needle on policies. For
everybody else.
Period.
Yeah. All right. Thanks very much for being here. Great insights. Yeah.
Good job.
All right, that's our program for today. Go to AmericanBlackJournal.org for more information on our guests and to check out past episodes. And you can always connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. We'll see you next time.